What's up, people? Piz out here, and this video has been a long time in the making. When I was doing my Texas Chainsaw 3D review, it kind of dawned on me that, you know, considering the fact that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original from 1974, is not only my favorite horror movie of all time, but just one of my all-time favorite movies, period. And I've talked about it so little on this channel. I mean, I've talked about it, you know, here and there, but I've never devoted an entire video just to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I started making videos on this channel in 2009, so we're talking, 4 years. So that's what I intend to do now. I want to talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I want to talk about the film. I want to talk about its impact. I want to talk the fact that its impact is still, all these years later, just as prevalent, if not seemingly more so. The film, of course, I mean, we all know the story. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the plot of the movie. A van load of hippies basically are on their way to two of the characters' grandparents' house in Texas when they run afoul of Leatherface and his cannibalistic, grave plundering family. And the thing that got me about the movie when I first watched it years and years and years ago was just the raw ferocity of the movie. It's almost got a documentary type feel to it. The picture quality, the graininess of the picture, it's washed out. The fact that, the actors don't, it's like they're not even acting. It's like they just picked people up off the street in Texas, the oddest looking people that they could find, as far as to be not necessarily the main cast, the hippies in the van, but just the people surrounding on the periphery of the movie. And of course, the Sawyer clan. The fact that the movie just builds and builds and builds and builds. It's a slow kind of start, and then it builds and builds and builds and builds, and the movie peaks at the end, and it just stops. The movie just stops. I think that first time I watched it, at the end when Leatherface is doing his dance and Sally's got away, and the movie just ends. I think I probably just sat there and just watched the credits roll in utter amazement. The film had a major impact on me. I admired the movie not just for being a great horror movie, but I think for just being a great independent film, period. And when you read about the movie and you sort of, the history of the movie, the making of the movie, they shot it, in Texas in the middle of the summer. It was super hot. The dinner table sequence they shot, they just kept shooting. They blacked out the windows. They had real, animal parts in the house. They started to decay because of the heat. The cast really kind of started to go crazy, which only lends to the madness. I think enhances the madness that's already in that scene, that sequence, and just takes it to a whole nother level. It was a difficult movie to make, but they took the time to. There's so many beautiful shots in that film. Yeah, it's grainy. Yeah, it's washed out. Yeah, it's very raw, but there's so many beautiful shots in that film. There's a lot of, dolly track. There's a lot of the camera moving around, which you see a lot in TOBE Hooper movies just in general. I love the scene where the one character's on the swing outside the Sawyer house, and she gets up and goes inside looking for Kurt, who's met his fate. And the camera goes under the swing and follows her toward the house, and the house just kind of rises up and kind of just sort of consumes her. I love that shot. Leatherface chasing Sally through the woods. There's so much, they in the commentary on the DVD. and I'm sure on the Blu-ray as well. They only had a certain length of dolly track, so they'd lay it, run it, cut, move it, put the camera on it, so they had a very, meager budget, but they really made the most of it. The film is incredibly intense, like I said, incredibly raw, and just absolutely ferocious. There's lots of symbolism. People have talked about, the symbolism, lots of symbolism in the film, right from the start. I mean, with the sounds of the the flash bulbs from the camera, and the flashes of like a corpse, and then you see the corpse arranged on top of that tombstone. Just from the start, I mean, you are uneasy. It just throws you into this surreal world, and the movie, like I said, builds and builds and builds, and just ends and just sort of drops you. Wow. I mean, I still, when I think about, I can vividly remember being in high school and renting that movie. When I was a kid growing up, as a video store rat, going there all the time with my mother to rent horror movies, pretty much all horror movies. Only one horror movie would she not let me rent. All the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the Halloweens, stuff like that, she was fine with. When I would say, what about Texas Chainsaw Massacre? My mother was like, no, you're not watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm not going to let you watch people get cut up with chainsaws. So, I mean, it was really until, I was in like high school before I decided to rent it and sit down. And I remember it was the old media version of it, with that really cool sort of painting of Leatherface on the cover and Sally's eyes. And it was a tape that had clearly been, put through the ringer. It had been watched lots of times. And, it's already a grainy movie, but on VHS, on a worn VHS, it was super grainy. And I love that. That's why I've not bought the movie on Blu-ray. Because I can't imagine that movie in beautiful high def. And I don't really want to watch it in high def. I've got the DVD, I've seen it on DVD a lot of times, but my version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is grainy and raw and washed out, and it's damaged. It's damaged. But I just love the film so much. Once it was the film was finally made, only one company wanted to buy it. It was a company called Bryanston, which unfortunately was ran by the mob pretty much, and everybody who was involved in the movie basically got ripped off, and nobody really made the money that they should have made off the film. And there was a lot of tumultuous, there was a lot of bad blood between the cast and Tobe Hooper throughout the years, and I don't know if there still is or not, to be honest, but it's got a very interesting sort of history of the making of the movie, and so on and so forth. Its release, and just a very tumultuous all around kind of movie. As far as the movie's impact on horror movies, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the Citizen Kane of the horror movie. It, I think, single-handedly created the contemporary horror movie, and I'm talking about the slasher movie, which we still see today. We saw all the way throughout the 80s, most of the 90s, even all the way up to today. It created that archetype of young cast being dispatched one by one by a killer, a masked killer with a signature instrument of destruction. And, that is the archetype that all slasher movies pretty much have followed. And it originated, in my opinion, with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A lot of people will say Psycho was the original slasher movie. I disagree. For me, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre all the way. There have been so many sequels to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There was a remake to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There was a prequel to the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And earlier this year, we got another reboot for what will most likely be more Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies with Texas Chainsaw 3D. And I think that alone just shows, the name of the movie has a weight to it, has a power to it. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, for a lot of people, especially me, is sort of, as far as contemporary horror movies, is sort of the ultimate contemporary horror movie. It was, like I said, it was the trendsetter. It created, it was the prototype. So, yes, I love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for all of those reasons. It is, as I said, in my opinion, the all-time, my favorite horror movie of all time. I think it's, like I said, the Citizen Kane of horror movies. I think without it, the face of horror today probably would not be the same. Probably would not be the same. I know a lot of the early 80s slasher movies, Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th 2, we're heavily inspired by some of the giallo Italian stuff, but Chainsaw, like I said, it created the archetype. It set the mold that so many movies tried to fill. And, they still are to this day, and they're still making Texas Chainsaw movies because, as I said, that movie, that title, carries a certain amount of weight to it. So yeah, I was kind of surprised I hadn't sat down and done one of these videos just talking about the impact of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Just talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre in general, considering, like I said, that it is my favorite horror movie of all time. One of my favorite movies of all time, period. Not just a triumph, I think, for horror, but just a triumphant independent film in general. I think it deserves all the kudos that it gets, and much, much more. And so yeah, I'm going to just stop blabbering about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think I've done it justice. I can finally say that I sat down and did a Texas Chainsaw Massacre video for my channel. I'm just smothering it in love that it richly deserves. So for anybody who has not seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974, directed by Tobe Hooper, go run immediately, buy it, watch it. If you haven't watched it in a long time, sit down, pop it into the old DVD or Blu-ray player and watch it again. It's also, I can say this too, it's a movie that hasn't, it's aged well. A lot of 80s, a lot of slasher movies, particularly those ones from the 80s, haven't really aged well. Chainsaw has. Chainsaw, has only gotten better with age, I think, to be perfectly honest with you, because you see all the bad movies that were inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre, movies that have tried to capitalize on what Texas Chainsaw Massacre did and, failed or did it halfway right. And, you go back and see the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it is a tour de force. So, yeah. Anyway. Until next time, you guys take it easy, and peace.